Hello, welcome to another Q&A live all about OET. My name's Rebecca and I'm here with you for the next 60 minutes to answer any preparation questions you might have about getting ready for your OET test. So if this is the first time that you've joined me or you've been a number of times, you're very welcome. It's lovely to see already over 100 joining us live from Artificial OET YouTube and Facebook. And remember to like and subscribe to our pages if you want to keep up to date with regular news, inspiration, and tips for getting ready for your test. So today's session is very simple. If this is the first one that you have joined, as it shows on the screen now, you just need to put your question into the comments section of wherever you are, either Facebook or YouTube. Those comments come straight through to me here, and I work my way through as many of them as I can in the next 60 minutes. I never manage to answer all the questions. There's always far too many questions coming through, so don't be shy. If you have a question you'd like answered, it's better to get it in early. It gives me more chance to answer it. So let's go have a look at what's coming in already. Hello to everyone joining so far. It's lovely to have you all here. Lots of people joining at different parts of the day, which I can see from good evening, good night, good morning. So it's wonderful to be so global. Here's a first question coming through from Sajju on YouTube, which is, can we use full name in the letter introduction and later just the surname? So yeah, this is a common question that candidates ask us about the patient's name in their letter. Our advice, because we understand this is good practice for working in a healthcare environment, is that in the introduction, you use the patient's full name if they are an adult. And full name means their title, their first name, and their family name, their surname. So 3 names together. So for example, Mr. Joe Smith would be their full name. And then when you mention them again in subsequent paragraphs, the first time in each of those paragraphs, you could use their title and their family name, so Mr. Smith, for other mentions. And of course, if you're mentioning the patient multiple times in the same paragraph, use their name the first time around, and then using a pronoun, he or she, his or her, is appropriate after that. And using the name is really just to keep things really clear for the reader, so they don't get confused perhaps with any other people that you're mentioning in the letter that you are each time referring to the patient. This question coming from Amani on Facebook says, if I wrote lemon, not lemonade, and orange juice, not oranges in the exam, is it false? So this question is about listening part A and recording the answers that finish the gaps for the consultations that you're listening to, and you're completing some notes that the professional has made about the conversation that you're now listening to, and you're completing those notes. And it is really important that you write words exactly as you hear them from the audio. You're not encouraged to paraphrase what you hear, because paraphrase is not accepted. So it is important, and my suggestion would be, although I haven't seen the question paper you're looking at for this question, that if you had written lemon or orange juice, those would be wrong, because they are different to the answer that you're telling me is correct. Lemon is different from lemonade. Orange juice is different oranges. So you do need to make sure you're writing down what you hear in the audio. All right, let's carry on. Sorry, just getting myself organized with the questions that have been coming through. That's great. Okay, here we go. Here's a question on YouTube. I'm sorry, I'm not able to read Arabic, so I'm not sure of your name. But the question is, what are the reading subtest sections? So for reading, there are 3 parts to the test, part A, B, and C. And these are the same for all of our OET professions. So while writing and speaking are specific to your exact OET profession, reading and listening are generic. They are of wide interest to a number of healthcare professionals. And in the 3 parts, slightly different reading skills are being tested. So in part A, your ability to quickly find information from a number of different locations is being tested, and to accurately record specific details. So the information that you're finding, recording it accurately in the answer booklet. For part B, you're looking at short texts, typical text that you would find in the workplace, updates, policies, memos, emails, the types of text that you would find in your staff room, or perhaps being distributed by your manager. And you're reading those texts to identify what action needs to be taken having read that text, or what is the main idea, what is the impact of that text on your work going to be. And finally, part C is testing your ability to understand opinions, attitude, how meaning is developed through longer texts. And these are the types of texts that you would regularly read as part of your professional development requirements. So these are things like review, journal articles. They're covering developments in healthcare, cutting edge technology, advancements, and so forth. So different skills that are needed for different parts of the reading test, and therefore it is important that you approach those parts of the test differently. You don't try to use the information retrieval skills in part C. You need to use different skills, which are looking between the lines, how opinion is presented, and so on. So it is good to understand the format of the different parts of the test. If you want to know more information than that I have just quite quickly provided about a different part of the test, I really recommend our 4 masterclass videos. These are short videos, they're about 20 minutes long, and it goes through the different parts of the test, the format, the way that it's assessed, how long each part of the test is, and so forth. So I'm posting the link to those masterclasses into the comments now, that will come up for you wherever you are on Facebook or YouTube. Remia on YouTube is asking, have there been any updates in writing connectives? So this is something that candidates ask us fairly frequently, if there have been any updates for writing. And our answer is always no, there haven't been any updates. There are no changes to the writing test or any part of OET, nor have there been any changes to the advice that we give to candidates about their approach to OET or the writing test in particular. What can sometimes happen is we might publish a new blog article covering a common area of query for candidates, and candidates might see that new article and take it to mean that this is new information or new advice. It's not anything different to what we would have said if asked that question in the past. It's just us making sure that our content remains current and up to date. In fact, we last updated the Writing Connectives blog article about a year ago, not with any new information, but just with some more examples. It is something that a lot of candidates have questions about, perhaps because the way that connectives are used in the OET writing test is a little bit different to other language tests perhaps that you've used. If you've tried an English test before where you're asked to write an essay, for example, different connectors would be suitable for essay writing, which is much more academic writing, to the connectors that are used in letter writing, which is much more functional language communicating information about a patient. So I'll put the connectors blog, which, as I said, we last added to about a year ago, into the comments. It gives you lots of ideas about what is and isn't good practice for a healthcare letter, and some examples and quizzes for using those connectors so you get a good understanding of it. Ismail on Facebook is saying, do we need to wear a mask during our speaking test? This will come down to a couple of points, Ismail. If there's a reason that you personally need to wear a mask, perhaps because you are immunocompromised at some point, and so it is a recommendation for you to wear a mask, that is something that you can discuss when you're booking your test. And obviously, we respect the need for candidates to protect themselves and their health at this time. The other reason you might need to wear a mask is because the venue where you're sitting the test is mandated that masks are worn because of local COVID regulations. The venue should inform you of that when you're receiving your test day timetable. So make sure you read any information and emails carefully that you receive from the venue that will explain that to you. In most cases, my understanding is that masks are not being worn for the speaking test, but you can always check that out, as I said, directly with the venue. Ahmed is asking about whether there have been any updates since September 2018, because that was when he last took OET. Ahmed, there haven't been any updates. That was the last time that the test was changed, and there are no plans to update the test again going forward. So the information that you find on the OET website, on our Prepare page, all of that is current. All the sample test materials available from the OET website and in our shop are all current. So there's nothing that you need to do that differently to the last time you took the test. Sarumi on YouTube is saying, when will the June 11 remarking results be announced? I don't have a specific date for you, Sarumi. I know that it takes around 3 weeks for remarking results to be published. If you are feeling that that date has passed, you haven't heard from us, the best thing, if you've got any questions, in fact, about booking your test or remarking or results or anything like that, the best strategy is to contact the OET customer care team. That's really easy to do. If you visit the OET website, you'll see a little blue box in the corner of the screen. Used to be a green help question mark. It's now changed to a blue box which says live chat on it. And if you click on that, you'll be able to contact a customer care team member. They're available 24 hours a day, Monday to Friday. They can look up your candidate account and give you any information that they have to solve your query. Jijo on Facebook is asking about why the listening test is very difficult these days. This is another common query that candidates ask us. There'll be sort of other candidates talking about tests that they've taken. Perhaps they haven't been successful in their test. And so they tell other candidates preparing for the test that it must be because the test is getting harder. In fact, the test is standardized. And what that means is the level of difficulty for the test that you take, whether it's the test coming up at the end of July, whether it was the test that you took last weekend or a test that you took earlier in the year or later in the year, the difficulty of that test is standardized. And there's a really important reason for that, and that is that a number of really important regulators accept OET results. So healthcare regulators like the NMC, the GMC, the ECFMG, APRA, these regulators all accept OET results. Also, government departments like the immigration departments of various countries like Australia, the UK, and now America accept OET results for immigration purposes. These are really important regulators, and they need to know that the grades that a candidate is showing them from their statement of results are the same regardless of which test day they took it or which year they took it. So we can't be making the test easier on some dates and harder on other dates. We have to have demonstrated, which we have done, to these regulators and immigration departments that our test is standardized. What is happening, I think, when candidates say the test is difficult is that those candidates taking the test haven't accurately prepared for the test. So it could be that they are relying on unofficial materials or untrained teachers who haven't been trained specifically by OET. Or perhaps they have been using official materials and proper training routes, but unfortunately their language level isn't yet at the level that is required for the score they want for listening. So candidates sometimes take the test aspirationally. They are keen and excited to start a new healthcare career that OET can assist them with. And so they take the test before they really have improved their language skills to be the level required by the regulator they're applying to. So those are generally the reasons candidates are saying the test is more difficult. It's not because the test itself has changed. I'll answer this question from Wills. It links to the earlier question and the article that I posted into chat a few minutes ago about connectors. Furthermore and moreover, are common academic connectors used in essay writing. They're not ones that are recommended for a letter. However, is much more of a standard connector and can be used in letter writing along with words like although, despite, therefore. These are all much more appropriate connectors for letter writing. So do look at that article on connectors that I posted into the chat. I think you'll find that really useful. This question from Tifalenji on Facebook, kindly go through the structure of writing. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier about reading, when I was asked a question about the structure of the reading test, I mentioned that writing and speaking are profession specific. So that means there is a specific writing test for nurses. There is a specific writing test for doctors. There's a specific writing test for physiotherapists, and for each one of our 12 OET professions that can take OET. Now, that means your paper is specific to your profession, and it will be on a topic that is very familiar to you in that profession. But the actual structure of the test for all professions is the same. So the test takes 45 minutes. 5 minutes of that time is set aside for reading of the case notes that you're given about the patient that you're going to be writing a letter about. And during that 5 minutes reading time, you can only read the case notes. No writing or underlining or highlighting if you're taking the test on computer is allowed during that 5 minutes. It's there to give you time to understand the scenario, the patient's healthcare condition, and what information you're going to need to communicate to the reader. After those 5 minutes, you then have 40 minutes to write a letter as outlined in the writing task, which is at the end of the case notes. The writing task explains who you are writing to, what their professional role is, and what their care is going to be for the reader, for the patient, going forward. And there are many different reasons why you might be writing to another healthcare professional. The standard reasons are to refer the patient for future treatment from the reader. So it could be to refer to this reader for a second opinion. It could be to refer them to provide more kind of specialist treatment. It could be discharging the patient. Perhaps if you've been treating the patient in hospital, the patient is now returning home or to the place where they usually live. You might be discharging the patient back to their regular doctor or their regular healthcare professional. Or you might be transferring them, particularly if the patient is moving house. You might be writing a letter of transfer to move that patient from yourself, from the care of yourself, to another healthcare profession. So there's a number of reasons why you might be writing a letter, but the structure is always the same. You have 5 minutes reading time and 40 minutes to write a letter. Just going to scroll forward now to look at some of the more recent questions. Let's take this question from, just struggling to read the name, Enaira on Facebook. When the patient is below 16 years old, do we still need to use a salutation? So I mentioned a little bit earlier, when the patient is an adult, using their full name is expected in the introduction of your letter. And we say an adult is a patient who is 17 years or older. If the patient is 16 years or younger, then you can use their first name only. They're considered a child in that case, and you just need to use their first name. Adult patients would use full title, first name, and family name. All right, let's move on to some more questions. All right. This question from Georgian: can you please tell us more about OET booking payment pathway using a third party? I'm afraid this is too technical for me to assist you in this preparation session. It's not my area of expertise, but this is another example of something that the OET customer care team can help you with. They're available right now, and they will be also available after this session. So if you have any questions about making a booking, test venue locations, making payments, contact the customer care team using that blue live chat button from the OET website, and they will be able to assist you very quickly. This question also on similar lines from Megha on Facebook: is there any chance to bring a paper-based exam to Qatar? Megha, we are obviously expanding the test to a number of new locations at the moment. It is much easier for us to open a computer venue. There are less pieces in place that have to be organized with a computer venue in terms of not needing to ship the papers to a specific location that has secure storage, because the papers are stored on the OET computer software. But we do take feedback from candidates about where they would like test venues and the type of test they would like to take. So we have recently opened a computer venue in Qatar. We will still continue working to find a paper venue there as well, but that is likely to take more time. Kurat on Facebook says, in reading part A, will the question paper be taken after 15 minutes, or can we edit it if we complete parts B and C earlier? That is a common query that candidates ask, Kurat, and the answer is that the paper is taken away after those 15 minutes. It's physically collected in if you're taking OET on paper. If you're taking OET on computer, the answers will be submitted and parts B and C will be loaded onto your screen. So you don't have access to part A again after your 15 minutes. And that's because part of the test is to check your ability to find information quickly. Daddy on YouTube is saying, are there any official resources to improve reading? And I would say, yes, there are a couple of different locations you should check out if you want some assistance with your reading. The first one, I'm just going to hide your question so I can pop up this banner on the screen, is a reading playlist that we have put together on our YouTube page. So you might want to take a screenshot of that playlist, as you can see the link on the screen right now, and search that up from the OET YouTube page. Otherwise, you can easily find it just directly going to @official_OET YouTube, looking at our playlists and finding the reading playlist. That contains a lot of videos from our all-star experts about approaching each part of the OET reading test. And in addition to that, visiting the OET shop, where you'll find a number of officially recommended study books and resources. And some of those course books and study books contain lots of tips and strategies for improving all parts of your test, including reading. So if you're looking for some more skills, I would recommend purchasing one of those books from the shop. All right, let's have a look. Sorry, my questions have got out of order again. All right, here we go. Aki from YouTube says, in the OET test, why are they not providing headphones for the listening test? I'm in New Zealand. So for the paper venues, this really comes down to the size of the venue and the facilities at the venue. Small venues are still generally using speakers, which are broadcasting the listening test to the room at the same time. These are less problematic than giving candidates individual sets of headphones. There's less that can go wrong with one set of speakers compared to multiple headphones. So if that's something that's important to you, that you prefer to use headphones for listening, you can check when you're looking at the location of the different test venues for a venue that uses headphones. Obviously, there may not be one in your immediate location, but if you're willing to travel, you may be able to find a venue a little bit further away that is using headphones. It is something that you can check from the venue page. Nadia on Facebook says, can we underline paragraphs with pencil in the paper-based reading part? Yes, absolutely, you can. So the reading texts, you can underline or circle or make other marks next to them as you prefer during your reading test. And if you're taking reading on computer, you can also use the highlighting function to highlight in the text as you're reading, if you find that helps with your understanding and answering of the questions. Mario on YouTube is saying, how can we improve our speaking skills? So really, as with most parts of OET, the best way to improve is to practice. So to make use of the official practice materials available in the sample test page of the website. We recently, within the last month, added a new speaking roll card for all of our OET professions. So if you haven't checked the sample test page recently, you may not have seen that new card that is available. I'm just going to post a link to the sample test page in the comments now. And when you're practicing for speaking, it's a really good idea to record yourself on your phone, perhaps completing that speaking test with a friend or colleague or family member, so that after you've completed the role play, you can listen to yourself, compare your speaking with the assessment criteria that you can find on the test information pages of the OET website, and really look at the scores for the different band descriptors. You need to be aiming high across all of the band descriptors to be getting a B grade. So looking and comparing your listening to those high band descriptors to see if you're matching the requirements for both the linguistic criteria and the clinical communication criteria. Annie on YouTube says, is it okay to write everything in capital letters in listening and reading? Yes, if this is your preference, you can write all of your letters in full capitals. It comes down to preference. There's no rule that says you can or you can't. So if you find it easier to write everything in capital letters, that's absolutely fine. Samina on YouTube says, could you please tell me about the updated way of writing reference and writing patient's age? So Samina, there's nothing that has been updated about the reference. Perhaps this is something that candidates are talking about on social media, which is why you feel like there has been an update. But the standard advice that we have always given to candidates for the reference line is that it's where you include the patient's name and their date of birth, because essentially in real life, the purpose of the reference line is to provide details that the reader can cross-check against their records, perhaps on their database, or if they're still using paper records, in their paper records. So names are something that they can easily search for, as well as date of birth. Perhaps if in their medical practice, they have a patient, with the same first name and family name, which actually was true for me when I was growing up. There was someone with the same first name and family name in the district where I lived. You could then further cross-check it against our date of birth. The other Rebecca was a year or two older than me. So obviously checking our dates of birth would then identify which one of us it was. So the reference line is for name and date of birth, not for any other details for social history, just for those two details. Pratikshya on Facebook says, can you please tell me about the arrangement of the paragraph, like first, what should I write, then later on? So the way that you're organizing your letter in paragraphs really depends on which information the reader is going to find more significant, more important than other information. So you could organize the information in a couple of ways based on that importance. One way would be to arrange the paragraphs in chronological order, so telling the history of the patient's medical issue, starting with when it first began, how it has developed, and leading up to present day. You might change that order slightly if the situation is an emergency, because in that situation, the information the reader would find most important is the most recent information, what has literally just happened to cause the emergency situation that the patient is now in. And then after explaining what has just happened, returning to more of the historical information to show how that situation developed. The other way that you might thematically, so when the chronology is less significant, perhaps there hasn't been such a long time period for the healthcare scenario to develop, or perhaps it's less significant to what has been happening thematically. You might organize in terms of perhaps the patient has been hospitalized, what treatment has been given to them. So you describe the hospitalization. You perhaps then describe elements of their social history that are relevant to the reader, how they're going to continue care, perhaps their medication, compliance might come into another paragraph before you finish the letter with the requests to the reader of how they are continuing to care for the patient. Sorry, excuse me. Nadia has a question asking about clubbing of exams. So clubbing is a term candidates use for combining results from multiple test dates. Now, this is something that is accepted by a number of nursing regulators, but to really understand which regulators accept combined clubbed results, the best place to do that is with that regulator's website. So to visit the website for the regulator, or to contact them through their website, perhaps to mention your specific situation and whether they accept clubbed results in your scenario. So there are a number of factors that each regulator does a little bit differently around the time period between test dates when they will accept combined results, which results they will accept, and so on. Excuse me. Just take a little sip of water. Hopefully my voice is going to last for the remainder of the hour. Raphael from YouTube says, what score should we get in each criteria on writing to get a B? Now, this is information that you will find on FAQs for each part of the test in the test information pages. And for writing, the FAQs are suggesting that you need to get a 2 out of 3 for purpose and 5s out of 7 for the other assessment criteria for writing if you want a B grade. If you're aiming at a grade that is slightly higher or lower than that, we would obviously amend that those recommendations that I've just made. But you can see the test information page and you can see the FAQs that I've just taken that advice from in the link that I've just popped into chat. Beatrice on Facebook is asking, can I write requests as part of the medical history or other paragraphs outside of the requesting paragraph? So Beatrice, this comes down to organisation and layout, the assessment criteria specifically looking at how you have organised your letter. And the requirement is that you group requests together into the final paragraph, because that is accepted to be the best location for the reader to really understand that detail as a request and to leave reading your letter with that key information in their mind. So we don't recommend merging your requests into other paragraphs. Instead, put it all together in the final paragraph. All right. Megha is asking, can you please give us guidance in listening and reading part C? So Megha, I've already talked a little bit around reading today, but I can give a few extra tips to do with listening part C. I'm going to bring up a little slide to show you some tips for listening part C. So with listening, you are given 90 seconds before each of the 2 audio starts, and it's really critical that you use that reading time effectively. And so what we're recommending that you do in that reading time is to really focus on understanding the 6 questions about each audio, checking that you understand what the question is asking you to listen for, and then to spend any remaining time that you have available looking at the 3 answer options and noticing what is different about each of those answer options, really trying to identify 1 or 2 key words that demonstrate the difference between the 3 answer options, because they will help limit what you are trying to listen for when the audio starts. And when you come back to the question as you're going through the audio, you'll remember what you were focusing on during that reading time, and it will help you avoid having to read and listen at the same time. So the reading time is really critical and something that you should practice with properly. When you're doing any kind of sample test, don't skip over the reading time to just get straight into the audio. Make sure you're training yourself to use those 90 seconds effectively. The second tip for listening C is really make sure that you keep your focus. It's very easy to become distracted, either because concentrating so closely on something like the listening audio is tiring to your brain, and it will easily distract itself from completing the task, or because you become distracted by considering the answer to the last question, or perhaps because you hear a word that you're unfamiliar with, so you pause to think about what the meaning of that word might be, and so you lose your focus to answering the question that is being discussed at that point. So really make sure, be very vigilant about your concentration during listening part C, and make sure that you are intensively listening for the whole of that audio. And the final tip is, if you do find that you are struggling to answer one question, when you hear the presenter or the interviewer moving on to the next question, just move on with the audio. Each question is completely independent, so there's no requirement for you to have understood the previous question and get the answer to that question correct to be able to answer the next question and get that question correct. So just move on, and at the end of the audio, just make sure that you've put an answer against every question, even if it's meant you have to guess the answer to one of the questions. It's better to have an answer entered than none at all. All right, coming back to the questions. This question from Aya on Facebook says, can I use a highlighter while planning the case notes? It depends which which version of OET you are taking. If you are taking OET on computer, then you are able to use a highlighter function to highlight case notes on the screen as you are using your writing time. You can't use the highlight function during the reading time, but once the writing time starts, excuse me, you are able to use the highlight function on the computer. On paper, highlighters are not allowed at all, but during the reading time, you are able to circle or underline or make other marks on the case notes so that you can, like as I was saying in the computer test, you can identify key information once the writing time has started. Asma is asking a question about why in Kuwait the exam booking is going to close very early, almost 3 months early, although it's not like that in other areas. Asma, this is purely down to how popular the test is at the moment in Kuwait. The venue that we have opened there is quite new, and we will look to increase capacity so that there is more seats available in Kuwait going forward. Once the test is up and running and has been running for a number of months, we look to increase capacity because we know that the test venue is able to manage that. And also, once the initial rush of candidates wanting to take the test in a new area has passed, then it should be possible for a booking much closer to the test date to be made. Sandy on Facebook is saying, please make the listening clear. It's sometimes difficult to hear what the patient is saying. So this comes down to being familiar with patient's accent, OET uses accents from around the world to reflect the fact that it is a global test, but also that the countries where you are aiming to work are multicultural countries, and you will hear many accents from your patients and colleagues when you arrive in that country. And so we want to prepare you for that eventuality, for the workplace, by training you now to be familiar with different accents and different speakers. But I can reassure you that all of the speakers chosen for the audio recordings are specifically selected for the clarity of their voices. And all of the audios are timed so that the frequency, the speed of speech is at pretty much natural speed, but it removes things like ers and ums and people talking over or interrupting each other. So the speech is clearer than it would be if it was just a natural recording without any kind of script. So that is one way that we assist candidates for the listening test. Another way that we assist you is that if there are two voices in any one audio, one of the voices is male and the other voice is female. So it makes it very clear for you to identify between the two speakers. So between, for example, the patient and the professional in part A, or between two colleagues in part B, or the interviewer and presenter in part C. Having one voice as male and one voice as female really clarifies for you who is speaking at any time. All right, I'm just looking now as we're coming into the last 15 minutes of the session for some questions that I haven't asked already. If you feel like I'm skipping over your question, it could be because I have already answered it earlier in the session. So once the session comes to an end, you'll be able to watch this video again and hear those answers that I perhaps gave out at the beginning. Harith is asking on Facebook, how specifically are spelling mistakes in listening part A corrected? So Harith, there is some flexibility allowed for spelling mistakes in listening part A, but it really depends on the word that you are misspelling and how you have misspelled it. So there is an expectation that candidates will be able to spell the majority of words correctly, particularly very common words that are considered at a level lower than the testing level for OET, which is, of course, around the B grade mark that most regulators are requiring from candidates. So lower level words should definitely be spelled correctly. There is an expectation that you would know how to spell those words correctly. More technical words or more complicated words are allowed a flexibility of getting that incorrect, provided that it's clear what the word is that you have written, that the assessors can understand the meaning of what you have written, and that is the correct answer. So that's really how spelling mistakes are considered. Bongani on YouTube is asking, what do we do if the listening subtest audio is not clear? I heard there's a group whose audio was not clear from number 1 to number 6. So before the listening test starts, or once the listening test is introduced, The first little bit of instruction is there to act as a kind of listening test for both on paper and on computer. And once those instructions are read out, if you cannot hear clearly, you should notify an invigilator or the proctor who is watching your computer-based test. Let them know that you cannot hear the audio clearly, and they will be able to adjust the volume, the sound, so that you can hear more clearly. It is your responsibility during your test to make known the fact that you can't hear the audio clearly, so that the test day staff can try to correct that for you. If after your test, perhaps there was external noise that you were unable to hear clearly from, and that wasn't rectified by the invigilators or not able to be controlled, then you are welcome to submit a test day complaint that the external noise impacted your ability to complete the listening test. You need to submit that within 2 days of your test date for it to be considered. A few questions coming through one after the other about listening as well. One I've already answered about the availability of headphones, but this question, similar line to the one I've just answered. Yes, as I was mentioning, at the very beginning of your computer test, when you're going through the tutorial, there is a point of that to check the headphones are working. Also at the start of the listening test, as I've just mentioned, if you're having any difficulty with your headphones, that's the moment to mention it to the test day staff. Anil on YouTube is saying, is it important to mention the hospital name in the writing test? I would say not particularly, unless it's going to be of interest to the reader, or perhaps it's somehow significant to the reader which hospital particularly the patient was being treated at. But in most cases, I don't think that is going to be significant information. It may not be provided in the case notes either. So you can make your judgment on that, like with other things in the case notes, based on what you think the reader would find important or not. Shashika on Facebook says, what are your ideas about remarking, is the word, for OET, specifically for writing? I got a 290 in my attempt for writing. So I can explain to you how remarking works, and that should help you make a decision whether you want to apply for it or not after you receive your test results. Firstly, to explain how the original marking works. So every test paper is submitted to the assessment team here in Australia. So regardless of where you take the test around the world, whether you take the test on paper or on computer, all papers are marked in the same location here in Australia by our team of highly trained assessors. And for every paper, for every subtest, 2 assessors independently mark your paper and score it independently of each other. So they don't know the score that each other is giving, and those 2 scores are combined and processed with a couple of different formulas based on the test paper that you took and the assessors that were used to score your paper to produce your final result. Now, if when you receive your result, you feel unhappy with it, you don't feel it reflects your test day performance, you might consider applying for remarking within 5 days of receiving your result. What will happen if you apply for remarking is your paper is again assessed by 2 assessors, but they are different to the assessors that marked your paper originally. And the second set of assessors are not given the previous set of scores. So they have no idea what your original score was. They mark it as if it was the first time around, using the same assessment keys or descriptors. And again, their scores are combined, and that is processed to provide your remarking result. Now, in some instances, you might see a slight change in your results because of human grading. You could see perhaps a slight increase by 10 or 20 points on the numerical score. And for someone who's borderline between one grade boundary and another, like you are, Shashika, that could be enough of a difference for you to get the grade that you want. So going up to a C+ grade could be sufficient for you. And so depending on whether you are very close to the grade that you wanted or not will also impact your decision to apply for remarking or not. If you are many points away from the grade boundary that you're looking for, I would suggest it isn't worth applying for remarking because you're unlikely to see that much of a change in your score from remarking. All right, I'm just going to look for a couple of final questions, and then we will talk about what's coming up in other live sessions from OET in the next few days and weeks. Let's have a look on this. This question from Thelini: in reading part B, is it better to read the whole questions and answers before reading the paragraph? Thelini, there's really two ways of approaching part B and part C questions. One is, as you've said, you read the question and all of the answer options, perhaps identify what is different between the three answer options. Then you read the text to find which of those answer options is covered most exactly in the text. Or the other strategy is to cover up the answer options with your hand so that you can't see them, and just read the question and look at the text to try and find the answer to the question yourself. That will work most effectively if you pay very close attention to the question, really understand what the question is asking for you. Some candidates find that is a strategy that helps them to avoid the distractors in the answer options because they can locate what they feel to be the answer and then more easily identify which of the three options matches with what they have found in the text to answer the question. So either strategy is effective, and you might use a mix of both strategies in your reading test. All right, the final question I'm going to answer is from Abigail on Facebook, who says, is it possible to just sit for the paper you haven't got the result that you wanted in? This also comes down to, I discussed a little bit earlier, it's one of the questions to contact the regulator that you are hoping to use your OET results with. They have different requirements around resits. Most regulators, I would say, require candidates to resit each subtest each time they take the test. So you can't just take an individual paper, even if you got the scores that you wanted in the remaining subtests. But it is something to double check directly with the regulator, what scores they require, what they accept for remarking, resitting, and so forth. All right, so that brings us very close to the end of the session. I'm just going to let you know when the next Q&A session will be. So if you'd like to join me again in a couple of weeks' time, I will be running a session a little bit later in my day, which will make it afternoon or morning time, depending on where you are in the world. You can see a number of locations mentioned there. So do join me again for that session. We'll post details of it nearer the time. Also, make sure you join our All-Star live sessions that are happening a couple of times a week. We have another session coming up from Swoosh English on Friday. Those are very popular sessions where Scott from which goes through a role play live on the session, using a candidate who is joining the session to go through the role play to provide feedback and advice based on how that candidate completes the session. So that's coming up on Friday. And we have even more sessions due next week. We have a session on Tuesday from WLES. They will be leading a session which is on listening, on reading. So particularly on reading part B and eliminating incorrect options. So avoiding the distractors and eliminating those incorrect options. That sounds like it will be helpful for some of you that have been asking questions about reading in this session. And next Thursday, Set English will be leading a session on writing and creating a clear timeline. So that sounds like it will also be very handy for a number of you as well. So do make sure, as I said at the beginning of the session, you have liked and subscribed social media channels so that you get updates about those live sessions and that you're able to join them when they go live at that time. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, it's a pleasure to answer your questions. I will see you again very soon. Take care. Bye for now.